And I'm very pleased to introduce one of our partners. We partner with Kobach, which stands for
Central
Ohio Professional Education Cooperative. Okay? And so we're very pleased because we have two folks that are part of Kobach that are here today. One of them is our speaker, and the other one is kind of the founder of Kobach. So first of all, our speaker is Mr. Nate Quilter. And then the other gentleman that is with him is Mr. Jay Lindner, and he's right over here. So without further ado, I'm going to let Nate get started. He will have about 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. And normally in the past, both Jay and Nate have been very gracious about staying as long as we have questions. So if you need to leave on that half hour at 12:30, please do. But if you have questions, please go ahead and feel free to stay. If you have a question and you need to leave, I'll have a sheet of paper in the back, and you can write your question down. Let me know who you are, and we'll ask the question here, and then I'll also email it to you. I will let you know that we are recording today, so it will be on the MWR webpage in about a week, and the slides will also be there. They have been very gracious from Kobach, and they said yes, we can have their slides. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Nate Quilter.
Well, welcome, as said, my name is Nate Quilter. I'm here representing Kobach, and it's a nonprofit that just educates. The goal of this nonprofit is to educate on all different topics of wellness. So I work at a financial planning firm up in Dublin. We do a lot of financial topics on financial wellness, but in addition, there are emotional, physical wellness as well. So if there's anything you're interested in, check out the website, kobacheducation.org, or talk to Michelle, and she can line up speakers on those aspects. As I mentioned, I kind of focus on the financial planning aspect of it. Work in an office up in Dublin with Jay that Jay founded, but we're just here to educate. No sales involved. Don't worry about my firm. It's all about just financial planning and educating here. There is a handout. In addition to the slides, it's an evaluation form, and I do ask that you complete that. It's just so I can report back to Kobach how many people were here today, how many people we helped out, as well as to improve the presentation. If there are things you'd like to see more of or less of, we can customize it in the future based on your feedback. So today we're going to talk about securing your financial future, the 10 critical aspects of financial planning. So it's a lot of ground to cover. So first off, I do want to say nobody's financial plan is going to be exactly the same as somebody else's. There's no one size fits all. So you could be sitting next to somebody with the exact same age, position, family size, but completely different goals and visions for the future. So this isn't really to nail down a financial plan. It's to help you think of ideas in your own lives that might help you out to secure your financial future. Now, there's a lot of ground to cover. I do hour presentations on some of these, just one particular topic. So it's going to be kind of just a quick flyover on everything, just touching on everything. But like I said, if you want to hone down on one particular one, just let Michelle know. We can come in and talk about that in the future. But we're going to talk about setting goals, budgeting, creating an emergency fund, insurance to protect what you have done, what you have saved, using credit, and then investing and building up, accumulating wealth. We're going to talk about tax planning. Two of the biggest goals are saving for college and retirement, so we're going to touch on those, as well as estate planning. So first off, setting our goals. So when you set your goals, this is the kind of foundation, the starting point when you are coming up with a financial plan or setting up for your future. You need to lay a base of what you're hoping for. These are your dreams. What are you working towards? And depending on what those goals are, there are going to be different ways you want to save or invest to get there. If your goal is to purchase a house in the next year or two, you're going to want to save differently than for retirement, which may be 30 years down the road. So when you set your goals, you want to use the SMART acronym. If you haven't heard this before, S is specific. So you want your goal to be very specific. For example, we have clients that come in and say, okay, I want to save for my child's college. I want to plan for that. Okay, that's a great starting point. Now we need to get more specific about it. Do you want to pay for them to go to Ohio State or Harvard or wherever they want to go? First off, how much are we saving as far as where they're going to go? Number two, do you want to fund all of it? Do you want to fund half of it? Number 3, do you want to just fund tuition? You want to fund tuition, room and board, and books, and everything. So the main point is just you want to be very specific on the goal to see where you're headed. Number 2, you want that goal to be measurable. You want to be able to know if you're on track to get there. So another common thing, I want to retire early. Okay, well what's early? I want to retire by my 55th birthday. Okay, now we know we have that finish line that we're aiming for, and we can track each year to see if we're on track to get to that age 55 retirement. You also want it to be attainable. So I want to save $1 million in 1 year. Great goal, maybe not achievable for most people, or attainable for most people. I want to save $1 million over 30 years, definitely more possible, more attainable. So if you want something, now, I will say, I like to kind of shoot for the stars. I like to aim high, and that way if you fall short, at least you may have been higher than if you had aimed low and achieved the goal. So I like to make it something that's definitely a challenge, but that is hopefully attainable. You want it to be relevant, which just means important to you. If that's going to help you save the money, or just like dieting, if you have to be motivated to what it is. It has to mean a lot to you to keep on track and keep going. On days when it's hard, or when money's tight, saving for retirement. So you want it to be relevant and something that you care about. Finally, timely. I kind of put this in with measurable. You want to be able to know that there's a definite end point. So I want to pay off my credit cards in the next 18 months. 18 months from now is your time frame that you're going for, and if you're on track to get there. So now we've set our goals. The next thing we need to do is control the flow of money coming in and going out. So this is where a budget comes into play. So start budgeting, and it's kind of a scary word for a lot of people that don't want to do it, but when you budget, the first thing you want to do is you want to look at all the income you have coming in. So obviously employment income is going to be involved there, but also if you have rental properties, if you have a savings account that's paying interest, if you have investment accounts that are paying dividends out to you, any government benefits you may have, just anything coming in is going to be on the income side of this equation. Next up, expenses, and this is always the hardest one. We have, you can ask somebody what their expenses are. They can name their mortgage, their car payment, groceries, or X amount. And then when we work with them, we say, okay, here's what's coming in, here's what's going out. You should have X amount of dollars left over, and they just laugh. I'm nowhere near that number. So it's not a problem. It just means that there are expenses you're not thinking of. So when you track expenses, it's something you usually want to do over a period of time. It can take a few years to get you to the point where you're actually comfortable with what you spend on an annual or monthly basis. And the reason for that is some things are seasonal, so buying maybe birthday presents, Christmas presents, your gas bill in the winter may go up, things like that. So in the summer, you're not thinking about those Christmas presents. The other thing is some things may be occasional. New tires for the car, any car repair, things like that just pop up. Dental issues that might pop up. You're not going to have them every month, but they may happen every 3 years or something like that. So you just want to track it over time to get a really good feel about where you stand on that. Now, when you're looking at your expenses, there are really two categories of expenses. The first one are fixed expenses. These are ones that you pretty much have to pay and are usually pretty regular in cost. So, the rent or mortgage, a car payment, insurance, groceries, basic clothing, things like that. So you can kind of get a pretty good feel for what those are over a period of time. Next up are the discretionary expenses. So these are things that can change up a little bit. The surprises that come out, as well as kind of, I like to think of the fun things. So, eating out, going out with friends, traveling, gifts, things like that. That you could cut back on if you had to. But unfortunately, once you do income minus expenses, it's going to tell you whether you have a surplus or a deficit. If you have a surplus, congratulations, you have a positive cash flow each month, and now you can use that money to save for your goals. If you have a deficit, you're in the red. It's okay, maybe if it's a month or a short term, if something pops up, but you don't want to be running a deficit over a long period of time. So now we're going to look on the bright side. We're going to assume that you've done your budget and you have a positive cash flow, so you're saving money each month. The first place you want to save it is to an emergency fund. Emergency fund is just it's cash available or liquid or readily available money to pay those unexpected expenses that pop up that you can't plan on necessarily. They might happen in the future, but they're not. You don't know when it's going to happen. Now, they say, how much should you have for an emergency fund? The rule of thumb is about 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So it's kind of, well, where do I fall in there? 3 months, 4 months, 5 months? It all depends on your situation, really. So if you're the sole breadwinner for a family and you have 3 kids, you may want to go more towards that 6 month, because if something happens to you, maybe your spouse can't go get a job, or maybe it will take you 4 months to find another job. So if you're the sole breadwinner, I'd lean towards that 6 months. If you're married, no children, you both earn about the same amount of money, you might be able to get away with 3 months, especially if you can live off one of the incomes anyway. If you lose your job, then at least you could live off the other person's income. So maybe 3 months would be enough in that case. But it really just depends on a case-by-case basis. If you have a stable job, maybe the 3 months is a little bit better off. If you don't, if you're working on commissions every day, then maybe you want to go with that 6 months. So somewhere in that range. Keep in mind, you're probably not going to have 6 months or 3 months right off the bat if you're just getting started and doing your budget. So it may take a little while to get to that point. That's okay. Just save a little at a time until you get to that point where you are comfortable with it. So now you're saving up that money where you keep it. That's important. You definitely want it to be readily available so you can access it quickly. Now, with that said, how often do you write a check for 6 months worth of expenses? So I like to keep a little bit readily available that I can make a payment right now. Keep a little bit that you can get to it within a few days if needed, and try to get a little more return on it. Now, when I say a little more return, keep in mind you're not shooting for the stars here on your emergency fund aspect of it. For example, 2008, that was one of those situations where a lot of people lost their jobs, and now they need to go to their emergency fund, and guess what? Well, the stock market's down 40% that year. So now you're taking out 60 cents on the dollar that you put into that. So you want it to be liquid cash, or readily available. That's not going to be volatile and move a lot, because when you need it there. If you're building up in a savings account, maybe go to an online bank for the next step. Then it can get a little more interest. Then potentially, if you're eligible to contribute to a Roth IRA, that's a good kind of third step in that emergency fund. Roth IRA, it's technically a retirement account, but the money that you have contributed, you can take out without penalty. So you can access it, but again, you don't want to go too crazy with the investment in something volatile. Yes, Michelle?
What is the criteria, or what are the restrictions around a Roth IRA?
The main restriction is, well, number one, you need to have income. So you can't open up a Roth IRA without income, unless, if your spouse has income, there's ways you can do it with a spouse. The next kind of hurdle is income, combined income. So if you are married filing jointly, there's a phase-out range. For 2018, it was $189,000 to $199,000. So if you're doing your taxes now and deciding if you want to go put that money in a Roth IRA, if your joint income is over $199,000, your adjusted gross income, you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. If it's between $189,000 and $199,000, there's a phase-out range. You can contribute partial. And if you're under that $189,000, you can contribute the full amount, which for under age 50 for 2018 is $6,500. For 2019, that's going to be $7,000. Or excuse me, $5,500 if you're under age 50, $6,000 for 2019 if you're under age 50. If you're over age 50, the Roth IRA you can contribute in 2018 $6,500, and in 2019 $7,000. It's really is a $1,000. They call it a catch-up after age 50.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I missed it. Was there a dollar limit for single individuals?
Each person, it's an individual single, a dollar limit for income?
Yes.
For off the top of my head, it is. I'd want to get back to you on that. It's somewhere in the. I want to get back to you on that. It's a little more than half of the joint amount.
So somewhere around 90,000.
In that range, yes.
So if you make more than that, then you couldn't contribute to a Roth?
Correct. I believe it's closer to 120, but off the top of my head, I don't know that number. 110.
As a backup for a lot of these questions, irs.gov is an awesome site. And if you just go there and type in Roth IRA contribution limits, you will get a lot of these answers as well. You're more than happy to reach out, but that's a great resource to have for these kinds of questions on amounts and limits.
Absolutely. My email's on there as well on the first and last slide, so feel free to reach out to them.
You mentioned that you could withdraw the funds. What is the time frame that you have to leave it in there before you can withdraw it?
For your own contributions, there's no time frame. You can pull it out right away. earnings on it, the account needs to be open for 5 years. And there are penalties if you pull the money out before age 59 and a half, if it's earnings. So that, like I said, you only want to be able to pull out your contributions on this Roth IRA if you're using that as an emergency fund, the money that you put in, because you can take that out without penalty. And then if you don't need it, it grows for retirement in the future. So now we've got an emergency fund saved up. So now we need to worry about risk management. What could go wrong, and how can we protect what we're getting started? So common types of insurance now there are insurances for everything out there, but the most common ones you have the health insurance. So FEHB. If you have spouses that work in the private sector, they may have a health plan at their work that they use. So that's why you're working. And then during retirement, you could have FEHB or Medicare, things like that. So basically, you don't want to save up an emergency fund of 6 months and then you break your arm and now your emergency fund is completely gone. When you could have had health insurance that you pay a premium a little bit, and then it lessens the impact when the event happens. The real point of insurance is you're transferring the risk to another company at a cost. Now, depending on how comprehensive you want that insurance to be and how risky you are, that's going to affect the cost. So when you come up with a policy, there are all different variables you can change in it to change the amount that you pay each month. That's also going to change the amount of coverage you get. So for example, auto insurance, there are 2 aspects of this. If you drive in Ohio, you have to have auto insurance. So there are 2 aspects of it: liability and property damage. So liability is you're leaving work and you get in an accident and you just hit 3 doctors who are now out of work. They're coming after you. You might not have that money in the accounts, but your insurance company's liability insurance, hopefully you have enough to cover that damage. Next up, that car that they're driving, that needs repaired, and potentially yours. So if you have liability property damage, it's going to cover their car. If you have collision on your own, then it's going to cover yours and theirs. Then you can also get comprehensive if the car catches fire or gets broken into, things like that. Like I said, anything you add on is going to cost a little bit extra. And you'll hear the ads for state minimum insurance. Well, keep in mind that makes it legal for you to drive, but if you hit that car at doctors, it's not going to help you very much. It's only going to cover a part of what you're going to owe, and then they're going to come after you for the rest. Next up, life insurance. So this is basically to replace your income over time. You can pay you pay a premium, and there's term or whole life policies that last forever. The term lasts for just a specific term that you get. So really, the goal of life insurance is if you die, a lump of money goes to your survivors, maybe spouse and children, so that they don't have to cut their lifestyle very much because of the loss of your income. The property insurance, so this is if you own a home, it would be homeowner's insurance, or if you rent, you can get renter's insurance. Same thing as auto insurance, there's a liability aspect as well as a property aspect on this. Next up is liability insurance, and that's another word for is umbrella insurance. So that's above and beyond. They call it umbrella because it's up above and beyond your auto and your property insurance. Now you can only buy an umbrella policy if you have enough auto and property coverage. So you can't go buy that minimum auto insurance and then go buy an umbrella policy. They're going to say, no, you need to raise your auto insurance to X amount, and then you can buy the umbrella policy. But the umbrella policy, when you buy it, it's only a few $100 typically for about $1 million of coverage. But a lot of people, they rent, they think, I rent, I don't have enough stuff in my apartment that I have to worry about insuring it. Well, if you have a dog that might bite somebody, get that insurance. I get it just regardless, just to be safe. Next up, we have disability insurance. So this is if you cannot work. If you're hurt and you cannot work, they come in and pick up someone with a pay. Usually included with an employer, but you can also buy private or buy additional private from insurance companies as well. Next up, long-term care insurance. So this is, if you're going to need to go to a long-term care facility for needs, you can't take care of yourself, you need somebody, even assisted living, or even home care. You may need somebody to come into your home to help you. You can buy private coverage to cover you. If that event happens, they come in, that policy will kick in. Yes, Michelle?
I'm the question holder. Can I ask you a question on when you're looking at being a renter? For example, I rent my home that I'm living in. What would your recommendation be for liability coverage as a renter? Because I know it's for anything that happens on your property, it's not the responsibility of the owner of the property, correct?
Correct, yes.
So what would be, just round figures, a good number for protection's sake?
It all depends. If you don't have many things, just liability aspects, $500,000 would be good. I mean, 300,000, $500,000, and it all depends. It really, if you're in an area where you're more nervous about things happening, if you own a dog, you may want to get more. But at a minimum, I'd look at a few $100,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, even though you may have an emergency fund and you've got a positive cash flow, you are going to need to use credit sometimes, particularly like big purchases like a home, or sometimes just out of convenience. I don't know how to use cash on Amazon.com. I use my credit card on that. So 3 C's of credit. If you're trying to get credit, they're going to look at 3 things: capacity. Can you pay them back? What is your income and what are your expenses? Number 2. Okay, they figured out that you can pay them back. Now, will you? So that's where the character comes in. So they'll look at, if you've used it in the past, have you paid your bills? And then next up, collateral. Typically with bigger items such as a home or a car, things like that, they'll have a lien on the property that you purchased. And if you don't pay them back for what you borrowed, they can come take that property away from you. So that's what collateral is. It's something to hold that property that they can kind of hold over your head to make sure you pay. So how do they determine those 3 C's? First off, we start off with a credit application. So when you go to the bank to apply for credit, you're going to fill out, okay, here's my name, here's where I live, here's how long I've lived there, here's where I work, how long I've worked there, here are the bills that I have, the debts that I have. That's how they determine if you can pay, basically. Then they're going to go look at your credit report. Now there are 3 big credit reporting agencies, and you can go on to annualcreditreport.com, and you can actually get a credit report from each of those credit bureaus completely free if you want each year. And I recommend, particularly if you're going to take out a loan or apply for a loan in the next year or so, start looking at those and make sure there are no errors, because sometimes when you pull those reports, you'll find errors about those are going to say where you've lived over the last 10 years, 20 years, past credit you've used, and if you paid it, if you still owe on some of those that you just walked away from, those are going to show up on that credit report.
Would you do me a favor? Would you send me that link? Because I'll tell you what, I get check your credits, in emails or it'd be an ad, and I'm like, nope, not doing that. Because I think we all are very careful. We want to be very careful about our credit and our reputations and what we put into anything that's online. If you would do me a favor, and then I'll put that on the MWR webpage for those of you that are interested, and then you won't be like me and say, no, I'm not checking that. That's questionable. So we'll put that up if you would be so kind.
Absolutely. And I used to work at a credit union. People get these charges every month they don't know. And it was they went and got their credit report off the wrong site that they signed up for a $20 a month program that they didn't realize. Yes, sir.
Yeah, in addition to that FICO, I hear there's another kind of criteria they have now for credit scores and all. Do you know what that is? I heard something about it, but I don't remember what it is.
So there are actually all different credit scores. FICO is kind of the big one, and it's used based off of what the credit bureaus report. Banks can actually get all different credit scores. There's not just one credit score that everybody has. Banks can ask for specific criteria to be used in the score for this particular loan that they're going to make, and the credit bureaus comply. So the credit scores, what he's asking about, the credit score is a 3-digit number that they use where they can compare you to your peers, and it tells you basically where you stand. And you'll hear that all the time, the credit score. Now those free credit reports I talked about, you won't get your credit score on those. You'll have to pay for your credit score on top of that. A free way to get your credit score would be if you have a credit card. A lot of credit cards will just give you the credit score for free. You check it each month. Or when you do check your credit report for free, you can pay an additional amount to get your credit score.
And do I remember correctly, you can check once a year with each of the 3 different big credit score maintainers, the credit companies. You can check with them once a year for no cost, correct?
That's correct, yes. So when you go to get the free credit report, once per year per report. So there's TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. So each of those you can get one. So if you know you're going to apply in 6 months for a loan, go get all 3 of them right now. If you don't plan on doing anything, maybe just every 3 or 4 months pull one. Just so you kind of see, make sure they're all, over the course of a year, make sure they're all good, and then maybe wait a year and kind of run them again just to see if anything's changed or anything's
We have one more question from the back.
Sure.
There has always been a rumor that if you check your credit score, that it affects it, so it's negative. So if I go in and check my credit rating 3 times a year, there's a negative impact because it's been looked at 3 times a year?
Checking your own does not count against you. It's considered a soft inquiry, so it does not hurt you to check your own credit score. If you apply for credit, that's where it'll dig you down a little bit. That's what's called a hard inquiry. So if you go apply for a loan, that's where they'll kind of dig you a little bit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a quick question, credit score. When you get your, like Discover, card statement, you have 30 days to pay it. Does it affect your credit score if you pay within that first week, or if you just wait to the end of the month and pay it? Will that affect?
It does not really affect it in the sake that as long as you pay it on time. Now, you can't go calculate your own credit score with a pencil and paper over here, but they will tell you, here are the aspects that we use when we calculate it. So the biggest one is payment history. You pay on time. Number 2 is your utilization ratio. So that is, if you have $10,000 credit card and you use 1,000 of it, you're using 10% utilization. That's a good number. Over 30% kind of starts dinging you a little bit. So if I'm going to use a lot of my credit cards because I want the rewards points, I'll pay it partway through the month so my balance doesn't get really high before the end of the month.
This is a good example where for time, we'll definitely stay afterwards and answer some more of these if we need some help.
So when you take out a loan, you're creating debt. There are 2 different kinds: secured and unsecured. Secured is that where they have that collateral they can take away from you. Unsecured, that's where they can't take anything away. Your student loans, they can't come take your diploma away. So typically those unsecured are going to be a little bit higher rates than those secured are, because the secured, they know they have that safety net. So important considerations when you are taking out debt is the amount. So how much are you borrowing? Number 2 is the term. How long do you have to pay it back? Larger items such as homes and cars, you can run a longer time. Where if it's something, a $500 loan from the bank, they're going to have a much shorter time frame to pay that back. The rate is the percentage. So if you take out a $100 loan at 5%, you're going to pay 5% interest. That's the rate, that 5%. So the higher the rate, the term, or the amount, the more you're going to pay. So next up, we've talked about using debt. Now we're going to talk about actually creating wealth. Do you have a question?
So if you do one of those 6 months save as cash for situations, or 3 months save as cash, 12 months save as cash, I have heard different things from people. Does it hurt or help your credit score to pay it off before those 6 months? Is it better to stretch it out those 6 months? Some people even told me let at least $1 roll over into after the 6 months, or whatever it is.
I'm not sure if along the way, but I do know that they look at what types of credit you use. So by opening that and not paying it, and paying it off early, you don't have that loan that is giving your credit that they're showing that you're paying on it. So, and history, how long you've had an account open is important as well. So if you have a credit card that's 15 years old and one that's a brand new one, don't necessarily close that 15-year-old one because they're looking at how long you have that history of payments. So that's important.
Do you want to pay it off in the 6 months and then close the card? That would actually hurt your credit score.
This is one of the same as cash loans?
Yes.
Pay it off in 6 months. I don't necessarily know that it would hurt it, but it wouldn't help it by making the payments on it. I'm not positive it would hurt it though. I'm not sure about that. So now we're going to start accumulating assets, accumulating wealth. So it's invested. Some people think of investing as a gamble, going to the casino and just throwing it all on black. Some people look at it as, throw that money in that piggy bank. Every month I'm going to add a little bit in, and that's going to build up over time. It's actually kind of a combination of them. So it's a carefully planned approach where your goal is to grow your money between adding money in and letting that money grow on its own. But it's basically going back to those goals, and you're investing to reach those goals. So with investing, a big thing you want to think of is the risk-reward trade-off. So the more risk you take, the more reward you should receive from it. So if you're going to put all your money in government bonds, it's backed by the full faith of the United States government. Pretty safe bet. You know what? It's not going to pay as much as it's not expected to pay as much as this stock over here. That's kind of a high-flying stock. You might lose it all, but you might triple your money. So you want to kind of balance those out, the risk and reward. And when you're looking at that, there are 2 aspects that are really important: are your personal tolerance as well as they call it risk capacity. So how your ability of your plan to take on that risk. So personal tolerance is how do you feel? You know, in the fourth quarter last year, the market lost 20%. When you open your statements, were you terrified?
I was not very happy.
Yes. But the main thing is, did you make changes? Because you know what? If anybody looked at their statement in January, everything shot right back up pretty quickly. So, but if in December you say, oh my gosh, get me out of this, I can't take this. Well, now you missed when it came back up. And so that's kind of the worst thing you do. So you want to find a place where you say, okay, I'm not going to make changes. I knew this was going to happen. I'm okay with a loss now because I know it's going to come back. Or you manage how much you lose. So, you know, if the market goes down 30%, but you're only half in the market, hopefully you're only going down 15%. If you can handle that 15%, then maybe that's where you want to be half in the market. So that's how you feel about it. Number two is then how the ability of your plan to deal with that loss. If you're 20 years old and you're not even going to look at your statement, you're just going to throw $10,000 in and not look at it forever, to me, I say go risky. If you're not going to look at it, it's not going to bother you. You've got 30, 40, 50 years plus then during retirement, so you can take a little more risk. If you're retiring tomorrow, you might not want to take quite as much risk in your investments. But then number two, just the plan. You know, if you need to pull a lot of money out of those accounts, if you're retiring tomorrow and you need to pull a lot of money out of those accounts, maybe you don't want to take a lot of risk. If you're retiring tomorrow but you don't need to touch those accounts for 10 or 15 more years, maybe you can afford to take a little more risk, because if the market goes down 20%, oh well, I'm not touching that money for a while, it'll come back. So it's a combination of, you know, how resilient your plan is, as well as you know, how you feel about it when that market goes down. So when you're looking at those investments, you know, that risk-reward spectrum, there are kind of three things we're going for here. Number one, growth. It's what I buy today, can I sell it to somebody else for more tomorrow, or in a year, or 10 years? Number two is income. So is it paying out regular stream of income, like a bank account pays me every month, or dividends from a company every quarter? So do I have income coming in that I can use to spend on other things? And number three, stability. Will I at least get what I put in back? So that's just protecting your principal. Now, when you move towards one of these boxes on here, you're moving away from other ones. So if you're, you know, going for that high-flying growth, I'm going to try to pick something that doubles my money in a short period of time. Guess what? It's not going to be very stable. You might lose it all if you do that. So the more you go towards one box, the further you are from the other ones. So next up, when you're investing and when you're looking at your investments, you want to take income tax into consideration. So the first thing you want to look at are pre-tax dollars. So is it something you can pay for pre-tax? And that means when you get your paycheck, they've taken it out before you hit that line of taxes. So parking, you can do that if you live in a place, you know, where the metro or something, you know, where you take a public transportation. A lot of times your employer will let you pay for those passes pre-tax. Now, the important thing with pre-tax is, let's say you're in the 22% tax bracket. If something's pre-tax, you're paying, it only costs you basically 78 cents for $1 of paying it, because otherwise if you had taken the money out, paid taxes on it, and then paid for it, you only had 78 cents on that dollar to make that payment. So lower out-of-pocket costs if you can do a pre-tax. Some examples, healthcare, you know, that FEHB, if you're paying for that, that's going to come out before your income. So when you look at your W-2 at the end of the year, that number in box 1 doesn't include the amount that you paid towards healthcare. It doesn't include the amount that you put in your TSP. So the retirement plans, that TSP, same thing, that's going to be pre-tax, and transportation costs, another example. So in addition to putting it in or paying for it pre-tax, there's also tax-deferred growth over here. So that means no taxes are due until you pull the funds out. So the year that, if you put money in a bank account or a taxable brokerage account, the year those earnings happen, you have to pay taxes on them. If you put your money in the TSP and don't pull anything out, you never pay taxes along the way until you start pulling the money out. In some cases, when you pull that money out, it's tax-free. Only a few circumstances. Roth IRAs, as long as you meet the criteria, when you pull money out of those Roth IRAs, that's going to be tax-free, as well as 529 savings plans. We're going to get into more detail about those here in a minute. It's college savings plans. If you're using it for higher education, then you don't have to pay tax on it when you pull it out. Now, in those retirement accounts, the government is giving you a break on taxes to put it in and get that tax-deferred growth. But they're there for a certain reason, retirement or college planning, whatever it may be. If you pull it out for something other than that, that's when they ding you. There can be penalties involved. So before you take money out of an account, particularly a retirement account, double check, see what the consequences are of taking that into account. Here's an example to kind of show you the value of that tax deferral. So this is just a hypothetical example of, imagine you put $10,000 in today, 30 years from now, where do we stand? We're going to assume a 6% growth rate for both of these, and we're going to assume you're in a 28% tax bracket. Your tax deferred account, because you weren't paying taxes along the way, it's got a value of $57,435 out of 30 years from now. Now that account that you had to pay taxes along the way out of it, you've got $35,565. So pretty big difference. Now keep in mind, that tax deferred one, you're going to have to pay taxes later on it. So if you assume that same 28% rate, that $57,000 turns into $41,000 after you pull it out and pay the taxes on it. But at $41,353, still a nice chunk bigger than that $35,000. So it just shows you, if you have that tax deferral option, it can really help you save money. So one of the biggest goals people have, and that you need to save up for, you can't just pay on the spot, are saving for college, whether it's for a child, grandchild. One of the best ways to do it, now there are many ways you can, but one of the best ways are what are called 529 plans. So if you see all these numbers, these 401k, 403b, 529, 457, things like that, those are all just IRS tax codes that kind of define how those accounts work tax-wise. But 529 plans are specifically built for higher education, and they've actually just recently added where you can do private kindergarten through 12 education as well on these. But there are really two different ways to do it. So it's a government set up program, but each state runs their own 529. So Ohio has a 529 plan called College Advantage. Now there are two different ways. I'm going to just briefly touch on the one. It's a prepaid tuition plan. That's where you pay right now up front for tuition 20 years from now, or wherever it may be, 10 years from now for your child. Now, this is kind of guaranteed return in that you're basically buying credits early. It's limited to your own state's plan, so you buy it in Ohio or in whatever state it may be for that state, but it is for only in-state public institutions. The reason I'm going to be brief about this is Ohio got rid of it. So just keep it in mind if you move somewhere out there. There's still people that have that money in those, but you can't add anything into those now. So if you move somewhere, that is an option. Keep that in mind. But if you're in Ohio planning for college with the College Advantage, ignore that prepay because you can't add to that. So what you can add to is what's called the College Savings Plan. And what that is, it's an account that you own and you open it with whoever it may be that you're saving for their college as the beneficiary. You can always change the beneficiary every time. So if you have 2 kids and you put it in the first child's name and then they turn 18 and say, I'm not going to college, I'm going to go join the Army. Okay, well, let's just slide that account down to child number 2, because now all you have to do is change that beneficiary. So it'd be under my name with my child as a beneficiary, hypothetically. I control the investment of it. Whoever opens that account controls how it's invested. This isn't guaranteed. The other one, you were buying those credits. This isn't guaranteed. You pick your investments based off of the investments that they offer. So it's a limited choice of investments, but you pick the investments and then the account grows, and that account value is based on how the investments grow and what you put in. And then when you take that out, as long as it's for higher education, you can use it at any college in the country, regardless of which state plan you use. And as long as you take it out for higher education, tax-free. So gross tax-free, you take it out tax-free. Yes?
What if my kid drops out of college and I have money left over, and then, like, say I only have one kid and they don't want to finish school, or if I started, they don't want to go to college, like, where does that money go from there?
So you can take it back out later.
Okay.
They're just penalties. So the growth on it, you pay a 10% penalty in taxes on the growth, but the money you put in, you can get back without the penalties.
And also, when they turn of age, the account can go into their name, and they can then use it at a later date. For example, if they were to get a scholarship, undergraduate, you can also use it for other higher education costs.
And if you get a scholarship, that's kind of one exception they have. If they get a full ride, you can take out the scholarship amounts without those penalties. but you pay taxes on the gains.
Is the payment made directly to the institution, or can I use a credit card and get reimbursed out of the 529 plan?
When you would pull the money out and pay it, you don't. It doesn't go straight to the institution necessarily. So you would request the money out and then pay it, and then show that you had the whatever the cost. You can even get it converted. You can use a computer. You can buy a computer with it if somebody's in college. I'm gonna get there. I see a lot of questions on this. I'm gonna get to this at the end. If we have time, we'll come back to this, or I can answer questions later. But I kind of want to get through, make sure we get all the categories covered. And there isn't much more left. But I know time's running a little short here.
And we will record all the questions after this session goes, so the questions will be on the recording that we're gonna put on the web, okay?
So this is just kind of showing you the impact of, other than college planning, retirement planning is the biggest one. Even if you don't have kids, you're hopefully planning to retire at some point. The earlier you start, the better. Time is your biggest friend when you're investing, because what's called compounding interest. Your money, as you earn interest, the interest earns interest on itself, and it just builds very quickly, particularly in the later years. So in this example, it's assuming $3,000 put in the account each year at a 6% growth rate. We're not assuming any taxes. We're assuming this is a retirement account where that's tax deferred. You don't have to pay taxes along the way. If you start at age 20, put that $3,000 in a year. At age 65, you have almost $680,000. If you delay to age 35, about $254,000. And if you delay to age 45, about $120,000. So this isn't to scare you if you're 50 and you haven't started saving. It just shows you now might be the best time to start. The sooner you start, the better. That money has time to grow on itself. Time is really your friend when it comes to investing. And it's really hard to catch up later. A lot of people say, all right, I know things are tough now, I'll save it later. It's a lot harder not only to catch up later, but something usually comes up then that's going to take your time and your money away that you were hoping to save. So now when you're thinking about your retirement, kind of basic considerations you want to think about. Number one is, what kind of retirement do you want? If you're happy sitting at home reading library books in your hammock and eating ramen noodles, you can probably retire a lot sooner than somebody who wants to travel the world for 10 years and then go live in a luxury resort. So what you want that retirement to look at like is going to affect the other factors. So you want to add that freedom, whatever it may be, travel, hobbies, whatever you like doing. Think about that, and kind of picture that retirement and what that might envision and entail. And it's kind of hard to, especially if you're younger, it's hard to predict what am I going to like 40 years from now. But at least start thinking about it. Where do you want to live? Do you want to stay in your house now? Do you want to downsize? Do you want to move to a beach bungalow? Whatever it may be. Think about where you want to live and what the costs that would be associated with that. And then what other things do you want? Do you want to provide for your children or grandchildren? Or is it, hey, I don't have any, or they're on their own. I got my kids out of the house. They can deal with it now. I'm worried about me. Now, one word of caution. When you're thinking about saving for kids, maybe for college for kids or your own retirement, I always err on the side of retirement. They can always get loans for college. You might be able to fund it out of cash flow later, but if you're not anywhere near on track for retirement, kind of focus on yourself first. Kind of that, if the plane's going down, you put your own oxygen mask on before the kid. Take care of yourself first, and you can help them out later. They can take out loans. You can help them pay their loans back later if you're on track for retirement then. But always make sure you're taken care of first. You can't take out a loan for retirement. So next up, you want to think about when you want to retire. The earlier you retire, the less time you have to accumulate money, and the more time you have to spend money later on. Keep in mind, Social Security, you can't start that until age 62. And if you start at 62, you're taking a reduced benefit. There's a full retirement age everybody has here. Between 66 and 67, looking around the room would be my guess for your full retirement ages. But you can delay all the way up to 70 and have that benefit grow. But you can't even start Social Security until 62. Next up, Medicare eligibility starts at age 65. If you meet the requirements, if you're under the FEHB for retirement, you can continue with that as well. You can't start Medicare until 65. How long that retirement going to last? Number one, when did you retire is going to have an impact. But number two is how long are you going to live. I actually saw a shocking stat the other day. You hear the life expectancy is going up, it's going up. Well, this stat was saying of people who have retirement accounts. So when you say, okay, here's the life expectancy of everybody. Well, it was a study that came out just in the last couple of years. But if you have a retirement account, your life expectancy is typically longer than most people. If you're a married couple age 65, there's a 50% chance one of you will live to 92 years old, and a 25% chance that one of you will live to 98 years old. So when you're thinking about that, when you're planning for retirement, just think you may have 25, 30 years, possibly even more in retirement that you're going to need to fund. So when you're saving for that retirement, use those tax advantage vehicles and start early. So the TSP here at work, not only is it pre-tax if you do the traditional aspect, but you also get a match on that. You have a traditional or a Roth option. So the difference between those, traditional is that pre-tax money. If you are in the 22% bracket and you put $1 into the TSP, it really only costs you 78 cents. The other 22% you would have paid taxes on anyway. The Roth option is after-tax money when you put it in. So if you want to put $1 in your Roth TSP, it costs you $1 right now. Now they both grow tax deferred as they grow, but when it's time to go pull that money out during retirement, that Roth is tax-free. You don't pay any money, any taxes on it when you pull it out. That pre-tax money you put in, you pay taxes on at that point. So you want to kind of evaluate what tax bracket am I in now, and which tax bracket do I think I'll be in the future when you're deciding whether to put that Roth or the traditional. Yes, sir.
And you said that you could take money out of the Roth. You talked about it as an emergency fund option as well. You had said earlier you could take money out of it without penalty as long as it was just the investment and not what was compounding. Is that correct?
Correct, with a Roth IRA.
So there would be no penalty for early withdrawal, per se.
Roth 401ks, Roth TSP, they do have their own, the plans have their own rules of taking out.
So is there a penalty or not? Earlier you said no, and this slide seems...
For an individual IRA, there is not.
Right.
For a 401k or TSP, you need to check with your benefits department.
I'm only asking about Roth.
Well, there's a Roth TSP.
The Roth is, but if you have a Roth IRA, you go to Vanguard, open a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
Everything you put in that Roth IRA, you can take those contributions out. No penalty, no tax. They may charge you, the company may charge you a little fee to do it. 401ks, 403bs, TSPs, check with them if you're going to take any money out. They have their own rules that they can set on their particular plans. 457s, those have different rules that, it would take a while to get into each plan. But
For a Roth IRA, like on the Vanguard, if I went to the site to do that, does it have to come directly out of like my paycheck? Does it have to come from my agency? Or can I take it out of my checking account and just write them a check?
you can write them a check however you want to get the money to them, you can do it for an IRA.
For a Roth?
For a Roth, yes.
Okay.
Now, if you want to contribute to TSP, that has to come from your paycheck. You can't just go take money from your check and go contribute to it. So, yeah, 10% additional penalty applies for withdrawals for these retirement accounts if you take it out early. So estate planning, we want to touch on this. Intestacy, wills, and planning for incapacity. So intestacy is basically, let's say you have a $10,000 bank account and you die. Where does that money go? The state has a plan for you if you didn't write a will. If you haven't directed where to go, the state has a plan. You're dying intestacy if you don't have a will, or intestate. And each state has its own law, and this is just an example. Don't use this necessarily when figuring out, because it's usually kind of simple if it's, okay, me, spouse, and children. But if you start having blended family going in, and regardless, even if it is me, spouse, and our children together, it may not be what you want, the state rules. So a will is your way to tell the state how that's going to happen. But your wishes are irrelevant when it goes to intestacy if you don't have a will. It's just, here's how we're doing it. The state says, here's how we're doing it. There's no option on your end to control it. The will is your way to control it. So if you get a will, you can say, I want this to go to this. I want my coin collection to go to little Billy because he's my favorite kid, and I want my rock collection to go to little Jimmy because she said something mean to me. You can say where everything's going exactly how you want it in your will. Now, if it goes through will, it goes through probate. So there are going to be some fees involved through the courts, and the probate court's going to have its own fees, the lawyer fees a lot of times, and it's actually public information if it goes through a will through probate. So a lot of your estate plan is going to be trying to avoid that. But your will names your executor. So when I pass away, who's gonna make sure that what I want done is done? That's the executive. So they're in charge of it. Make sure you ask somebody before just naming them, because it is a responsibility. So, and I usually name a backup. Maybe they're incapable 30 years from now from doing it. So always name a backup to anything that you're doing on your estate planning documents. Another thing, particularly if you have children, really important to get a will. This is your way to say who raises them if you die. Otherwise, the court decides on their own. Yes?
I have a question about that. I'm looking at a child POA. So like sites like legal Zoom and stuff like that, like what will make it legal? Is it just getting it notarized, or do I have to see an attorney after I fill out everything online as well?
So, attorney is not necessary for these. I highly, highly, highly recommend an attorney, because I've seen people who have done these themselves, and it's a mess. It says, this is what I want to happen, but if that person dies, here's what I want to happen, and the thing they said there is that person. So,
Yeah.
they can be messed up. Now, I know for wills in the state of Ohio, it needs witnessed by 2 people.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be notarized, just witnessed by 2 people.
Okay.
So I really recommend on these you do a lawyer, not just do one of the onlines though. Just you're setting up some pretty big. It's a big deal what you're deciding here. So I want to make sure it's done right. Typically, and I'm typically a do-it-yourselfer. I paid somebody else to do mine.
Lawyer will do a great job showing the holes of a will or a not or a trust or whatever it is, so that you can make decisions on whether the will completely follows through with what your wishes really are, because there are restrictions. So having that guidance is a support that we do think is a valuable approach.
And you brought up a great point, power of attorney. There are all different estate planning documents you want to keep in mind. The power of attorneys, both financial and healthcare. Your living will, that's kind of where we talk about this incapacity. It can happen to anyone at any time. You go a car accident when you leave work today. Pretty morbid topics. I don't really want to talk about it. Car accident when you're leaving work today, you're in a coma, you can't make decisions for yourself. Who's going to make them for you? So there are a couple things you can do. Name that healthcare POA, they get to make the decisions for you. Number 2, you can do a living will, where you can say, hey, look, if 2 doctors say I'm brain dead and I have no chance to come back, pull the plug. I was in the office when I said, pull the plug. My wife's like, I'm like, all right, well, I know your answer, but for me, pull it. But it's your way to say what you want to happen when you get these documents in place beforehand. Lack of planning really puts it's a problem for the guardian, because if you're going to coma, you don't have a POA, power of attorney, somebody's got to go to the court and become your guardian. Then every time they want money to pay for a bill, they have to go to the court and get money. So that POA, there are different ways you can do it. You can say, no, but they can't do anything until I go into a coma, and then it springs into effect. Or you can say, yeah, I don't, if my wife, if I'm out of town, I'm called up to active duty, I want them to be able to buy a house and sign on it, for my name if necessary. But the guardian's decisions through the courts aren't necessarily what you want. If you have children and you don't fill out these documents, you may go to somebody that you didn't want to raise your children. So just keep in mind those estate plan documents are important. Even if you're young and 20 years old, they're very important to get set up. So we'll open up the questions now. Also, as Michelle mentioned, Jay and I will stick around if anybody has questions. And if it's something you don't want to talk about here in the private, part of me, kind of donating the time for Kobach and here to educate you is I do offer no cost, no obligation meetings. So if you say, hey, I don't want to talk about this here in front of people, just shoot me an email or fill out that questionnaire, put your information down on that, so we can have you in the talk in private in the office. So. But thank you for your time, everybody. I hope it was useful.
Thank you.
Any questions for the group?
So I know that we're just about at 12:30, so those of you that need to excuse yourself, please don't, be shy. I know some of us have to get back exactly on time. So, and as I said, we're going to keep the tape rolling so that if you have to leave now, you'll be able to see what the questions were and what the answers were, okay? So.
Leave these on a chair or what?
Yeah, please, or I'll take them. I can take the forms for you. Do we have any questions? I have a question. I always have a question.
Any questions for the group? Yes, sir. I know there were some hands for those, especially college ladies that I didn't get to.
Yeah, Tommy said it's 529. Isn't there a company called BlackRock that does that for you? You go, you have to go with them, or you don't go with them?
There are 2 ways, really. So College Advantage, you would choose your own investment options and use their options, their available investment options through the College Advantage. If you do the BlackRock, it's considered advisor, So there are going to be extra fees involved with them. So now, if you say, look, I don't want to deal with investments, I don't like looking at it, I'm not comfortable doing my own investments, then that's definitely an option that they'll watch out for. Just keep in mind though, there will be fees to do that. You know,
And then my understanding that BlackRock also does their TSPs for the government, do they, are they?
I'm not sure who actually administers it. Is it BlackRock? Okay. I know when I try to, so when I do planning, I try to look at like how things are invested, or recommendations on how people invest things. And I know that on the website it compared it to Vanguard. It said Vanguards are the closest, but it could very well be BlackRock. And it actually administers it. And the one who administers it doesn't necessarily use the fund. You know, so there's the stock fund, the GEC, there are certain options, and I don't even know exactly who is running those funds. But I know how they're invested, basically. I don't know who's running. Yes.
So I have a question about Roth IRA. If you contribute to that to the TSP,
Well, either
does that
we
mean
will
you
take
can't
a copy and
contribute
send it
to
to you,
Roth?
or you take a copy and send
They're
it.
separate. So you can actually do the maximum in the TSP and then still go to the maximum in the Roth. Assuming that you're still eligible income-wise to put into that fund. So you can always, the TSP, you can always max out your income, doesn't matter on putting money in the TSP. But that Roth, if you make over a certain amount, you can put it.
Okay.
One of the things that was brought up earlier regarding the credit reports, and I thought that's what I was hearing him say, but apparently not. Have you heard of, and again, we're not endorsing that, but like the LifeLocks of the world? I personally like that, and the reason is that when you look at credit reports, the damage is done. Now you gotta fight to get certain things removed or fixed. Where a LifeLock or some of those types of services are good, and your credit card will do it as well. Hey, there was a charge, is this you? So they actually catch it before the charge is made, and what a LifeLock would do is if somebody did steal your identity and they wanted to open up a credit card in your name, you're notified as it's happening, as opposed to 6 months later you found out somebody did it on a report. So being proactive, that's one of the reasons why I like that type of program as well. And you can get access to your FICO scores and everything on there as well. But it costs, it's a couple $100 a year. But it's proactive versus reactive, which is still better than nothing. But at least this way because I refinance a house, and when I refinanced, he checked with a couple of different places, so I kept getting pops. Was this you? Was this you? And I actually forwarded it to my broker who was independent. I said, is this through us? And he's like, yeah, we're checking with this one. Because I didn't recognize the name, but at least it forced me to do my own due diligence. But if you're not doing anything, and you get this notification, and they'll bother you until you say yes or no. And so you catch it at the front end, which is helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful to catch it beforehand.